Good afternoon and welcome to this month's show. I'm Luke McCormack. During today's show, we will discuss critical issues facing government and industry leaders in rolling out 5G strategies and technologies. With me on today's show are Major General Matthew Easley, Director of Cybersecurity, U.S. Army CIO, Dwayne Florenzi, Senior Strategy Executive, U.S. Air Force Office of Commercial and Economic Analysis, Dan Dager, National Risk Management Center, Supply Chain Risk Management Initiative Lead at CISA, Brian Shrumsky, Director of Federal Mobile and Connected Solutions at Verizon, Brian Wenger, 5G Solutions Architect at Palo Alto Networks, and Brian Kennedy, Director of Wireless Solutions at CommScope. Well, this is a fantastic technology that certainly unlocks a lot of capability, high bandwidth, low latency, efficient use of spectrum. What's not to love, right? Although there are a lot of challenges with implementing a new technology like this, certainly along the lines of supply chain risk, et cetera. I'm sure we'll talk all about that. Major Easley, let me start with you at U.S. Army. Give us a state of where the Army is in regards to implementing this technology.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It's really an honor to be able to speak to you and your audience today. For the Army, we are just at our starting point for 5G rollout in the Army. Our greatest success story to date is the start in combination with the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. They have started a whole series of activities across the DoD. And our highest priority in the Army right now is our Army modernization initiatives, our 32+3 initiatives out of Army Futures Command. And two of those, the synthetic training environment and the integrated visual augmentation system, are a way we're going to train our next generation soldiers on in the battlefield. But for those systems to work together, our integrated visual augmentation system is one of the key 5G initiatives for augmented reality. And the synthetic training environment has this virtual environment. But to make the two work together kind of in our camp posts and stations, we're going to need much higher bandwidth and much faster latency. And we see 5G doing that. So our first initiative is to make those two systems work together using 5G at Joint Base Lewis McChord. And we'll really see that this synergy between the transport, that high-speed transport that 5G will give us, as well as being able to push the compute away from that edge device and onto the 5G tower, is hugely transformational, because that's going to allow our soldiers to carry a lot less kit around with them, since they won't have to carry that transport right next to them. They'll have that 5G system near enough to them that they'll have that transport or that compute power.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because the soldier these days is a walking multi IoT device. It's almost essentially a data center, and I would imagine this type of capability, having that real-time low latency ability, is going to really enable and unlock a lot of capability for the soldier. Dwayne, how about at U.S. Air Force? I know you've got an extensive background in 5G in general. Tell us what's happening at U.S. Air Force and what's happening with sort of the whole 5G community, so to speak.
All right, great, thank you. Yes, I came back from industry a couple of years ago. I had been working with previously Alcatel-Lucent, which is now Nokia, GE Digital, and then Cisco, and telecommunications business development internationally. And so what's been exciting in coming back to the DoD is to see the innovative spirit, a real drive to do things differently and take advanced technologies at the early stages rather than wait until they're more established. And I see that's what's happening even with 5G. As everybody knows, 5G is really still in its infancy. It's still such an early stage. But right now, it's the time where we see the foundation being laid. For the Air Force, that means putting even 4G LTE first in 10 bases in the south part of the United States. And now we just gave out contracts for the western part of the United States. And so it's laying that foundation where we start with 4G and then move up to LTE. Additionally, many of you know that Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida had been affected by a hurricane. And so that's an opportunity to set up the base of the future. How do we bring innovation in at the early stages and set it up and use that and then scale it across the Air Force? And so even just this past month, there's been a workshop with industry and with the Air Force and trying to bring in some innovation into establishing Tyndall Air Force Base. And so 5G is part of that concept as well, especially as we think about the flight line of the future. And we can talk more about some of those use cases as we go forward. But even there, we brought in the team from Hickam Air Force Base that's part of the DoD 5G test beds. So it's not just what the Air Force is doing. What I really like, again, coming back into the services here, is seeing how the services are really working together, especially with this DoD 5G test beds across 12 different installations and all the services.
Well, there's a deep history, of course, of having DoD sort of get on the forefront and take this technology, harden it, and make sure that it can be implemented and scaled at the scale that the DoD needs. So the rest of the community certainly thanks you for that. Dan Dagger, along with all this great capability, I read an article about the geotagging ability that you're going to have that's less than a meter. And I thought, wow, that's awesome. And then I thought, wow, I wonder what the security aspects are of that. And I'm sure you're thinking all about these things. Give us a state of what's happening from a CISA perspective in regards to the national rollout of 5G.
Sure. Luke, thank you for asking me to speak at the Federal Executive Forum. And Tom, thank you. CISA's mission right now is to protect federal networks. And we don't have the resources to reach out to every federal network and protect it individually. So we do it through collaborative risk management. We identify the risks associated with the networks that the federal government utilizes, and we apply risk management mitigation techniques to mitigate that risk. CISA applies the three strengths that it has to do that. We have the strength of stakeholder engagement capabilities, our risk management capabilities, and then our technical expertise. And we take these strengths and apply them through collaborative risk management to secure those federal networks. I sit in the National Risk Management Center, which is the planning and coordination and risk analysis engine for CISA. We can take a look at threats. We can take a look at the vulnerabilities, the probability that the threat will exploit that vulnerability. And we also look at the consequence to the nation should the vulnerability be exploited. And then we share that information with the rest of federal government, with the state governments, with our regions, tribes, territories, the local governments at the state level, internationally, and then as well to industry along a sector, for example, or with individual industries in the information and communications technology arena. Or we share that information to the folks that are running the national critical functions. So we help make CISA the nation's risk advisor in what we do. And our stakeholders make more informed decisions when they have the risk information. It helps them identify and address issues before they become problems with regards to deploying 5G. We have a national strategy to secure 5G, and we also have a CISA 5G strategy that nests cleanly under that national strategy, Secure 5G. And we're operating in a framework with implementation plans to make those strategies a reality. And CISA is doing its information sharing role through with that framework in mind, with those strategy frameworks in mind. For example, we do some state, locality, tribe, and territory workshops. We've met with Washington, D.C., with Minnesota, and with Utah. Our stakeholders need assistance on 5G deployments, information, best practices, technical expertise, and CISA provides that. We coordinate a series of workshops, and then we provide them with the information that they need for that 5G threat environment, for the deployment considerations and available federal resources to achieve a secure and resilient 5G deployment. One of the other things we're doing is international engagements. As 5G connectivity becomes a reality in the US, there's a potential for an increase in untrusted vendors, equipment, and devices entering the area. Whether the vulnerabilities are malicious or inadvertent, there will still remain a need to maintain strong relationships with the international partners to communicate risks and to safeguard the flow of information. So CISA provides support through information sharing, through providing best practice information, through partnering with trusted market leaders to increase 5G standards and contributions. And then the other thing that's happening with regards to 5G is product development. It's one of the best ways to share information with our stakeholder partners. We develop a lot of products. It's an easy way to share that information. Things like the sector profile booklet, the 5G basics infographic, overview of risks that are introduced by 5G adoption. We have an excellent edge versus core paper that just came out, and then we have a 5G myths versus facts. I could go on about the products, but it's an easy way for us to share that information with others. It's public, so people can go to the CISA.gov webpage and look up supply chain, and we'll have all the products there.
What a fantastic time for CISA to arrive onto the scene, right? And have this coordinated effort. I think it's really important to do that. None of us can solve this alone. And as we have this new emerging technology, there's going to be these challenges, these risks, and mitigating these risks, identifying them, plugging up those holes, super important as we roll this capability out. Brian Shrumsky, that is your role, rolling this capability out. And I know Verizon is on a tear doing that and unlocking that capability across the country. So tell us about sort of the top line, what's going on in the 5G arena with Verizon.
Sure. Thank you, Luke, and thank you to the other panelists. Very excited to always talk about 5G. I started my career when we were at 2G, so we're up to 5 now, which is great. And just to comment on some of the stuff that our other panelists have mentioned, right? So as Dwayne mentioned, we're currently building out the OTL1 and those 10 bases he referenced earlier, which we're very excited that we see LT as well as a migration path to 5G. We're actively participating, as Matt mentioned, in the R&E experiments right now going under OSD and National Spectrum Consortium, as well as IWRP. And then the number one question I usually get from an operator, what is your security model, right? So just to round out with Dan, my public service announcement, we don't use any Huawei or ZTE network infrastructure is the number one question I get. But we're very excited. We're rolling out 5G very aggressively, obviously with our millimeter wave, as well as our dynamic spectrum sharing on our 5G nationwide. And the big news for us about a month ago that we can now comment is our C-band acquisition in terms of spectrum, where we invested $53 billion to roll out 5G services. And we will start that process in the fourth quarter of 2021, where we'll bring 60 megahertz of spectrum online, right? So the C-band will complement the 5G millimeter wave technology, where it will go further and wider. So we're very excited about that. Just to touch on some of the comments that were made earlier, in some ways, we are in early stages of 5G in terms of getting ecosystem or end devices out there to support things like immersive training. But in other ways, we're already well ahead, right? We have I would say all government agencies, federal, state, and local, are actually consuming 5G today, right? So when you look at mobile handset devices, so think smartphones from Apple or Samsung or other providers, agencies are already experiencing 5G, right? So one of the things that I always talk about when I'm on these events is you will consume 5G in many different ways, right? It can be simple as 5G mobile. You'll see 5G providing broadband access or internet access, very easy to understand. And I think what everybody's looking forward to in 5G is that immersive experience when you take all of that together and bring in edge compute when you want to do the next generation warfighter, right? Have a very immersive training experience on a testing or proving ground, a smart warehouse. Those types of things are actually under development and will actually roll out the next couple of years. But very exciting about 5G and the rollout, obviously with our C-band, and we're all in on 5G. You can see with our most recent acquisitions, as well as shedding some assets in terms of media products, and actually just focusing on core network and 5G being the tip of that spear.
Fantastic, and that's good to hear. Congratulations on that. Brian Wenger, how about at Palo Alto Networks? You guys are right in the middle of a 5G tear yourself and rolling out these types of capabilities, a piece of connecting it all together. Tell us about what's happening.
Yeah, thanks, Luke, and thanks to the other panelists as well. Palo Alto Networks has recently released our 5G native cloud security tool, which is there to kind of secure cloud environments and secure 5G environments end to end. We've been heavily engaged with a number of federal programs as well as some private programs as well to develop security standards for 5G. We've been heavily engaged in some of the OTAs, especially down in Albany. we've been working closely with NIST and NCCOE in their Lab of Excellence to develop some 5G security standards, as well as being engaged with 3GPP to help shape what their security standards and recommendations are to secure 5G environments going forward. So the stance that Palo Alto kind of takes when securing 5G networks is we look at it as a holistic ecosystem almost. We see end-to-end security as a major requirement, from the user equipment all the way to the core infrastructure that's hosting the environment, all the way down to the different network functions that are provided through the 5G ecosystem and the applications that are going to be hosted and actually providing the functionality for all the user equipment on the network. So we look to secure each one of those different functions throughout the ecosystem. And our goal is to secure them across all the locations, whether we're talking about securing it at the core, securing it at the multi-access edge, or even securing some of the applications that reside in the cloud. We're looking to kind of secure the entire ecosystem end to end. And that's what we're developing with NIST and with some of our 3GPP partnerships, is to help come up with recommendations for all of our federal customers that are adopting 5G to make sure they're doing it securely. One of the initiatives that we're kind of going through right now is actually taking the zero trust architecture that DoD recently released and mapping that to security controls that actually can be implemented in the field to protect these environments.
It's just a perfect opportunity and great timing to have the conversions of these different capabilities, this zero trust architecture available, 5G, which, you know, some would say is has some plug and play capabilities with it, but must have a web of security over top of it to stitch it all together and make it certainly make it reliable. Brian Kennedy at CommScope, tell us about what your role is, what CommScope's role is in enabling this fantastic capability across the community.
Yeah, Luke, thank you very much, and appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this panel today. And I think it's really exciting times for us here at CommScope right now. I think when you look at 5G, and I think Brian, both Brian's, you know, three of us on here today, but really summed it up quite well as to what 5G is all about. It's really more than just 5G. It's a lot of things that make it up, right? You do have the three pillars, right? The ultra low latency, ubiquitous connectivity, and massive data capabilities. But you know what people need to realize is building out the backbone to support this is really key, and that's what a lot of what CommScope does in many different ways. I mean, we work closely with all the major operating companies, developing solutions that ensure that the 5G network has a backbone that can support the ultra low latencies and the bandwidths and the capabilities that are needed and required to really truly bring a 5G user experience to bear. You know, the wired and wireless infrastructures, combining licensed and unlicensed spectrum to support the needs, when it's required by the providers. Everyone's talking about all the cool applications, but you must ensure that the plumbing is upgraded to enable full capabilities of that application to be met. And we're doing this in many different ways at CommScope, from inside the central office, fiber connectivity, all the way into the outside plant, offering solutions there into in-building wireless solutions. We also offer, smart poles. You're seeing a lot outdoor now in densification, where all of these different technologies that combine together need to have a more aesthetically pleasing solution, since we have to densify the network to really support the 5G, initiatives. So we're doing a lot of stuff in many of these areas that really help bring it all together, bring the technology together, give it a backbone and a infrastructure that it can work on for a long time to come. So we're really happy to be a part of this. And, again, the 5G evolution and revolution, you might want to call it, is certainly upon us all.
And we really do appreciate your role in stitching it all together. Certainly can't have a Ferrari going 150 miles on the Autobahn and then turn off on a dirt road, right? The whole end-to-end experience has to be there. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network.